Last Monday, Senate President Juan Miguel Zubiri was ousted as leader of the Senate by members of the administration's supermajority that he himself belongs to. He was replaced by another member of that supermajority, Senator, now Senate President Francis Escudero. Did infighting or jockeying within the ruling coalition claim Zubiri's position? Or was it instead a proxy fight, pitting Marcos allies against Duterte supporters? Good evening, I'm John Nery and you are in the public square. There is another possibility. Of the 24 men, and sadly they have all been men, elected Senate President since 1916, excepting Escudero, 18 served for 3 years or less, with 15 surviving only 2 years or so. Could the Senate last Monday have simply reverted to form? To answer these and related questions, we've invited two real experts who have spent many years trying to understand Philippine politics, either reporting on it or studying the Senate or even working in the Senate. Joining us online is longtime reporter and editor Inday Espina Barona, the colleague I've described many times as our indispensable journalist. And joining us here in the studio is Dr. Jean Encinas Franco, who worked in the Senate for 15 years and is professor of political science at the University of the Philippines in Diliman. Welcome back, Inday and Doc Jean, and thank you for joining us in the public square.
Hi, John. Hi, Inday.
Good evening.
Inday, let me start with you. Did this whole thing, what happened last Monday, did it surprise you?
No, actually, I've been hearing about that from Senate sources for 3 weeks. No. More than a month now.
Okay.
So I'm like saying what, but we can talk about that later. But also, remember Zubiri, he's like a cat. He's a survivor. He's so, how many times has he been kicked out because of electoral cases, and second, he's been had ups and downs of power in the Senate also, and it's nothing new to him. He's used to finding himself in trouble and then wriggling out of trouble by cementing or re-cementing alliances again. So I guess he'll survive unless we see a really greater fight. Because as you say, John, that supermajority isn't as solid as it looks like.
Jean, so it's nothing new, and yet was it surprising? I mean,
I was not surprised at all because I remember last year, I think there were already talks that some senators wanted to replace Senate President Zubiri. What surprised me was the extent of, or the number of senators who went against him. Yeah.
15.
Yeah.
He did say, Zubiri did say, that it was because he didn't follow instructions. What do we make of that? Inday first and then Jean.
Okay? The fact that he may have said that he wasn't following instructions, but the fact he's also surprised that Bato de la Rosa voted against him. Of course, Bato and his tears and his weekly performances. But on two big items, while he may have irked certain people in Malacanang who may have swayed on senators because he allowed De La Rosa to grandstand on a totally, really inappropriate Senate hearing. I will say that much. He also the Duterte people, De La Rosa, Robin, etc., also had to grind against him because they had thought, some of sources say in the Senate, that he left Risa, Senator Hontiveros, he didn't rein her in as she went after Kibuloy, who we know, of course, is very close to a certain sect. So I don't know, there may be something to not follow instructions, but whose instructors? Both sides from. So that's what happens when you play, and Jesus has been and Beats Zubiri has been a master of playing with political forces. Sometimes it can.
Yeah. What do we make of what he said?
That
He was sent following instructions.
Yeah, I think partly that must have been the trigger, but I don't believe that that's the only reason. There might be, I suspect there might also be individual reasons per senator, such as they want to prioritize they want the Senate, for instance, to prioritize their pet agenda. So they want to expedite hearings on certain matters, and they think that under Zubiri, these are not getting prioritized, or these are not getting set in the agenda of the Senate.
So what it seems to me is that if we follow Zubiri's own explanation, he seems to have displeased the Marcoses. He gave 3 reasons. The first one was standing up against the People's Initiative. I forget the second one. The third one is letting De La Rosa run this, as you said, inutil hearing into this supposed PDA EA leak and so on. But on the other hand, as you also pointed out, Inday, there are reasons for the other side to be mad at him, no? Allowing not only allowing Senator Ontiveros to run after Kibuloy, but actually signing on to the arrest warrant, right? So so this is what I'm trying to figure out. No? Who there were different reasons from these 2 big factions, no, for ousting him. In the end, was it really just he couldn't please everyone? Was it?
Yeah,
as simple
I think
as that?
so. Or people or members of the Senate could not read him. No, could not read his stance, because in wanting to please everyone, he failed to please anyone or something like that.
Okay, Inday, what do you think?
Yes, there may be some truth to that. As I said, Migs Zubiri, he seldom takes a very, very strong stance. I mean, in a way, he falls to the mat for a principle. Maybe the People's Initiative team was that, but he wasn't alone there. It would have been very hard, really, for the Senate, for that to get past the Senate, because their very lives, political lives, were at stake anyway. For example, I'll just give an example, John. He may have been part of, he was a fan of Duterte, the last, and yet he was very generous, very gentle with then Vice President Lenny Robredo, which is what he ended up in Ocho Derecho, although nobody could figure out why it's even there. And I do remember interviewing him and said, no, but I defended your budget. So he knows how to, he's a people pleaser, depending on where his interests lie also. But I think, and he usually gets away with it. I think dito lang talaga na it really caught up with him. I mean, 2 big issues that was very hard to control.
Yes, to your earlier point about Mig Zubiri being a survivor, even at the national level of the Senate, of course, you already brought this up earlier, the fact that he resigned from the Senate because the Senate Electoral Tribunal in, I think, 2010 or so, was about to issue a ruling easing him out of the Senate in favor of Senator Coco Pimentel. So he resigned and so on. And several years later, he was back in the Senate and became Senate President. So there is that to be said about him. If, however, we take what he said as truth, no, that he did not follow the instructions of the president or whoever was speaking for the president, and because of that, they eased him out, even though they are still friends and he still remains within the administration coalition. I would like to know, if that is true, is this part of President Marcos Jr. consolidating his political position? Right? So, okay, you have a rambunctious Senate, so many things are happening. There's something against Duterte's interests, but now there's something against President Marcos's interests. And then he says, okay, enough. I wanna replace this. So obviously, Bato won't be chairman of that committee anymore. Is he now flexing? Is he now consolidating? Are we going to see him, I don't know, what's the next step? Move on Vice President Duterte? How should we understand the next steps if we take what Zubiri said as truth?
Well, I think he wanted to rein in the Senate because the midterm elections is coming, and the midterm elections, whatever the results will be, will also define his last 3 years in office. And I bet that they also want to shape the results of the 2028 elections, no? So, and that's partly the reason why they needed to expedite the approval of certain bills, because at the end of the day, I mean, all presidents would want to have something to present, no, to the public, no, in the middle of their term and at the end of their term. So that's also the case. And of course, they also want to shape the factions, no, to influence how the factions in the Senate would take shape in the run-up to the 2025 elections.
Inday?
Yes, number one, I think it's more probably tama na they want certain things to move faster, but I think this is more a defensive step from Mr. Marcos. While it is true that the Duterte people voted against mix, I think that in the scheme of things, that Kibuloy thing actually mix. The interesting thing was when Mix was explaining that he was coaching it in terms that made it clear that he had no choice because Riza had done it. So it wasn't like, this is, he should be answerable. Now, he was actually stepping back a bit. But also, at Tudero, let's not forget, has been more standoffish. She wasn't with the Senate before. And need to be raised closer, known to be closer to the Dutertes than Cheese is. Cheese is, of course, the son of the former Agriculture Secretary of Mr. Marcos's father, the dictator. And by all accounts, from Congress, the Senate, mas whip master, mas si Cheese pagdating sa whip, si Mix, pag kailangan ng kilot-kilot, magaling. Pero pag kailangan ng todo push, siguro mas kailangan nila si Cheese. Ganun na kasimple. But I think also the president doesn't want any more embarrassments from the Senate. And he's probably more confident that Escudero, who can be stern when times call for it, will serve him better there than Mix.
It's interesting that you brought up the whip, no? Which is, party discipline or party quote-unquote discipline. Because a Senate source told me that it probably happened, what happened last Monday probably happened because Mix was most vulnerable. He didn't really impose discipline on the Senate as an institution or on individual senators. And my reading of that interpretation is some senators felt this was the right time. So maybe it was a confluence of different factors.
Yeah.
Right? So the Marcos family said, "Oh, bakit pinapayagan to pang-apat na hearing na to, trying to paint the president as a drug addict."
Oh, yeah.
No? But at the same time, you also had some senators saying, mukhang now is the right time. As Mig Zubiri himself said in his his first press conference as an ex-Senate president, last year pa he knew there was an attempt. So he was talking of two attempts. First one was unsuccessful, the second one was successful. So parang may ganun ding calculus siguro, no? Some of the senators were saying, now is the right time. Probably because they are angling for a better position before the elections. I think it was the PCIJ who pointed out that all of the re-electionists running next year all voted for Chis Escudero.
And also because the Senate is so small in numbers, and under different factions, because we don't really have a strong, we don't really have strong political parties. You know, it's so. That's why the Senate presidency has been very short, no, in the post-EDSA era, and that also makes the job of the Senate president difficult. No, you have 23 separate republics, and you all have to manage their ego. You all have to manage their requests. So I also understand Zubiri's emotional pitch last Monday.
Yeah, so it turns out that the norm is short terms.
Yeah.
2 years. I mean, we think of, pre-EDSA, Quezon being Senate President for 19 years.
Yeah.
But you also have Amang Rodriguez as Senate President for 11 years, I think. But even post-EDSA, so it turns out that sa longest 5 years,
Drilon and
Drilon had 5 years. Soto had, I think, 4 or 5
longer.
years.
Oh, yeah.
And then Enrile had like 4 years. They were not the norm.
Yes,
no?
exactly.
Maybe because you're dealing with 24 separate republics.
Yeah,
yes. What do you think about the idea that this was, in effect, a proxy fight? Okay, the Marcoses and the Dutertes, they have been sniping at each other.
Yeah.
Well, maybe at certain points, even going beyond sniping, right? President Duterte himself saying really outrageous things about the current president and so on. His son, the new mayor of Davao, saying equally outrageous things. His former Speaker of the House calling on the armed forces to stage a coup, right? I mean, that's beyond the pale. So it goes beyond sniping. So, nandyan na, nagpo-position na. And then maybe they thought this was the... So, do you think this was a proxy fight? That the pro-Marcos allies were saying, oh, enough, and let's vote him out? Jean first, and then Inday?
Yeah, unfortunately, the Senate has become some sort of a battleground, no? Between the two warring families, no? So it's not surprising that in the middle of it all, sinabi rin naman, I think, ni former Senate President Zubiri, no, that he was in the middle of everything, and it was really his position became untenable at some point, and that some people were disgruntled.
Inday, proxy fight nga ba?
Hindi ako convinced pa eh. Because both sides, as I said, both sides said voted him out, and I think that it could become that, but at the moment yet, it's not yet that bad. It will depend on, again, where Mig Zubiri lands in the next coming hearings of the Senate. At the moment, I think it's just a matter of overreach on his part or not doing enough or both at the same time. So it's just a matter of malas lang sa timing talaga. Seems to me.
One of the things that puzzles me, no? So that's why I also cannot readily say na proxy fight is take a look at those who supported Zubiri. The 7 votes for him are all the seatmates, no? He belonged to this block, right? The seatmates. I also had a chance to interview them. JV, Joel, Sherwin, Sunny, and of course,
Villanueva.
and Joel, yeah. And then,
Lauren.
tapos yung dagdag nila kasama sa seatmates, dating macho block, si Lauren at saka si Nancy, no? I wouldn't necessarily characterize them as pro-Duterte.
Yes.
Kaya parang hindi ko pa talaga, like you, I'm not yet totally convinced na proxy fight na. Baka there are so many lines and they're all entangled.
Yeah.
It's hard to clear.
Yeah, there might have been a trigger, the hearings, but as I said earlier, it was a confluence of events. There might be some issues on the part of individual senators. They wanted the Senate to prioritize their own agendas, and that's, everything came together last Monday.
Was this a good move on the part of President Marcos to force the issue, at least as far as the Senate presidency is concerned, on May 20 rather than on the day of the SONA? Like what happened with Alvarez and Speaker Arroyo. Was this a good move on the part of President Marcos to force the issue now? Inday?
Yes, and it's keeping with his personality. He doesn't really want, he's not fond of frontal clashes, as much as possible, he doesn't like that. And it gives him time also to whip up something for Sona instead of taking and becoming the center of attention instead of getting stuff done. Also, I think partly, I forgot to mention kanina, John, somebody from Mindanao said that while, of course, it was Riza who went hammer and tongs after Kibuloy. It was Mix, of course, signed as Senate President by arrest warrant.
Yeah.
And yet may feeling raw na parang hindi ganun ka-assertive in going after Kibuloy. After all, it's a Senate arrest warrant. So, may ask help from the PNP, but still the Senate arrest warrant. And of course, si Zubiri ay taga Mindanao, taga Bukidnon. So there was an element, sabi lang, there was an element about that.
Maybe I'd like to ask you now if we can anticipate how the Senate will conduct itself in the next several months. As far as, for instance, charter change is concerned, now that you have Senate President Escudero, do you see it progressing? Or as Mig said, Escudero himself is anti-chacha, so it's going to stay the same, like he were Senate President.
I'd like to believe that the Senate will follow public sentiment. I think there's a recent survey that says that majority of Filipinos do not like charter change. So because they have a nationwide mandate, some of them are electionists. And that would probably matter a lot to them at this point.
How do you view Cheese on the issue of charter change?
Against my record to see Jesus Cordero as being against that kind of charter change. No? Not only because it will take away the powers of the Senate or make them very vulnerable. But I think on the issue of just amending the economic terms to make it too easy to open up industries and everything, I think he's more firm na ayaw niya yan than other senators probably. It's not just a question of will the Senate have enough powers. It's a question, as he said this, as I followed him today, is more firm about na hindi kailangan yung economic, yung gustong tinutulak na economic provisions sa pagbabago sa Constitution. Kasi may marami pang mga bagay na dapat mauna kaysa dyan. I mean, that's what he's been saying. And so tama, in that sense, tama si Mix. Pumili kayo dyan ng anti-chat, which is also true.
Let's talk about midterm elections again. No? But specifically, I want to ask, let's assume that some of the senators voted to oust Zubiri in order to position themselves better for the midterms. So as we pointed out, all the re-electionists voted to oust him. Let's take the case of the new majority leader, Francis Tolentino. Will that position help him? He's not doing very well in the surveys. Unlike the other senators who seem to be safe in the top 8 or so, he's lagging. From your experience, does it help? I mean, is Senate Majority Leader, does that carry electoral clout?
I'm not so sure, but to the extent that you're always going to be interviewed, you're always going to have media mileage, plus you can earn POGI points from your fellow senators when they ask favor from you to calendar their pet project. So that would probably be a good thing for them. No? They'd probably help you campaign in the 2025 elections.
Pia, speaking of Tolentino, he was the chairman of the Blue Ribbon Committee. Now it's Pia Cayetano. We haven't really heard much from the Blue Ribbon in the 19th Congress. Do you expect this to change? Pia is also a re-electionist. Do you think she'll use the Blue Ribbon to pursue some high-profile inquiries?
I'm not so sure about Pia because Pia, I think she wouldn't. She'll probably choose targets that are not clearly on either both sides because she wouldn't want to antagonize either that. So she'll use it as a platform to get attention, but her target will probably be someone hindi konektado talaga or not that strong with either of the two leading political camps. So she'll be careful on that.
Well, a question for both of you. So, talk of the town also is the case involving Bamban Tarlac Mayor Alice Go. That came out because of a series of hearings conducted by one of the more obscure committees, the Committee on Women, Children, and Gender, which is the only committee chaired by a minority senator, Risa Ontiveros. I'd like to, do you think that the chairmanship won't change given the new leadership? So the leadership change took place Monday. I asked Senator Ontiveros, is the hearing on Wednesday pushing through? And said yes. So as far as you know, she's still chair. What's your reading? Do you think they'll take over this now that it's such a big issue? Jean, and then Inday.
Yeah, my sense is that they will not. First of all, the Senate Committee on Women is regarded as some sort of a minor committee. It's just that we have a very hardworking senator in the face of Senator Risa Ontiveros, and she has sort of redefined that particular committee. So I hope they don't change, because that would also be considered a political move if they change the chairpersonship of that committee.
Inday?
I don't think they'll touch Rita in the first place. In the infighting, she doesn't really factor in.
Yeah.
I mean, Rita, position siya dyan. Pangalawa, I think kahit paano pa let's face it, Risa, from where she's coming from, the palace probably thinks no fault of Risa's, but that her investigations are probably hurting her animals more than they're hurting the palace. So I don't think they'll be touched.
Yeah, and then so again, speaking of the Duterte factor, what do you think is going through the minds of the Duterte allies now, Bongo, Bato de la Rosa, now that they're hearing it was an attempt to drag President Marcos's name through the mud. That looks like it's coming to an end because they voted to oust the Senate President who allowed them to continue those hearings. I mean, what do you think? Did they think this through?
My sense is that they did not. Yeah. Because
Sabi
how,
nila,
why
dasal na
will,
lang talaga.
yeah, and why will you sign when in fact majority have already signed? So, the perfect excuse would be,
That's right.
since, yeah. So what value will it bring to you? So that's why I'm surprised, but I'm also not surprised at all.
That's Inday, can I throw that to you? Doc Jean brings up a great point, no? Bato did not have to sign as the 15th
Yeah.
because talo na si Zubiri, di ba? He will be ousted with just 13 votes. Why did he have to append his name?
Well, two things. One, wala naman mawawala sa kanila, sa totoo lang. The sniping will continue, but I think in this particular time, when you give a little, so that I think they knew that they had gone too far, and they had also anyway something some bribes against Zubiri. I think really for a time there may be a little give and take there to lessen the tensions, and then we'll probably see it rise again by towards January next year. But for now, I think they'll be settling down.
Or could it be Bato's ham-handed attempt to do a Zubiri, Try to play both sides. He saw the numbers and he said, dito na tayo. Para makita ni Presidente, pumirma ako. Is it possible? I mean...
Yes, atras ka rin eh. You'll try to see, and they're used to that. They'll try to see how far they can go, and then they pedal back. They were the same even during the Duterte administration.
Mm-hmm.
They would push and then skedaddle back when people would push back. So it's very typical of them.
Sometimes we laugh about what the senators do or don't do. But really, the issue of Senate independence is a crucial one. I think I'd like to find out your view. When was the last independent or adversarial Senate? This was probably the time of Gloria Arroyo, right? The Senate from 2007 to 2010, I think.
Yeah.
Right? With Magsaysay and... Right? I mean, they're the ones who fought back, right? But most of the Senates have been very much aligned with Malacanang. Tama ba? From your own experience. You're 15 years in the Senate. When was this?
I'll be dated. 1992 to 2007.
Okay. Well, I was just looking at this. In the 1990s, we had 5 or 6 Senate presidents.
Yeah.
So less than 2 years each, yeah?
Yeah. I think in the past there was the Countrywide Development Fund, yun.
Okay.
Tapos di ba naging PDAF? Well, sabi nila ngayon wala, so that's also so before that's probably also the reason. But during the time of Duterte, one thing that we saw was the phenomenal approval ratings of Duterte at that time, and I guess that became some sort of a currency of Duterte.
Yeah.
That's why senators were kind of scared to go against him. But there was also a time when Senator Trillanes was about to be arrested. I think the Senate did not allow it.
That's right. I actually visited Senator Trillanes in the Senate at the time to interview him. Senate President Soto did not allow the police to enter the Senate premises to arrest him. Inday, what made the 2007 to 2010 Senate possible? Why were they able to very actively push back against Gloria Arroyo? Was it because, unlike Duterte, she had very low ratings?
Exactly.
Or did they have other things going for them?
And remember, Gloria was toppled by very, very grave election charges. Very dirty, she was really bad news at that time. Even if she had actually won again, put her super majority in Congress, in the Senate, they felt more confident, I think, and by that time, really, where would she go? She was going to end that term anyway. So, kumbaga, bayad na sila. I mean, quote unquote, they could afford to stand their ground. Wala na siyang isisingil pa sa kanila. Duterte, of course, was a different animal. He said, he would just run after you, no rhyme or reason if he disputes him. So natural na may takot talaga sila kay Duterte doon. I think also, fiscally, the demise of the formal court institutions make them more dependent on, I guess, executive, I guess. So, merong kasabayan dyan. Right now, I think they don't have the same fear of the president in that sense. But I think, and we've heard that in terms of fiscal money stuff, very so close to the president, that they're very wary about. And I think, kung nababanggit rin ito sa problema ng Zubiri, but we're not going to go still into that kasi hindi klaro, but nababanggit itong tao.
So, in 2007 to 2010, you had a low-rating, lame duck president, and that helps explain why the Senate was in a position to push back. No? That's disappointing to hear, of course, because I wanted to find out what principles, what conditions existed in those 3 years that we can reclaim to make the Senate more independent. I mean, to have the Senate president say, I was fired because I wasn't following instructions. This is the third highest official of the land. And still following instructions, di ba? Parang grade school. Di ba? I mean, it's very candid, and we owe that to, I mean, hats off to Zubiri, in my view, for being that candid. But my God, it's also revelatory, right? I mean, sunuran lang.
Yeah. Probably says a lot more about Mitch than anything else. He could have said, talk to my principles. Hindi. Ang kanyang framing, hindi ako nag-follow instructions. They do. I think on certain issues, death penalty, on certain issues, individually, they may stand up against president. But on matters of fiscal accountability, the budget spending, infrastructure, the things that make the world go round for government, I think they're more amenable to give what the president wants.
Jean, short of changing the Constitution, what can be done to make the Senate more independent?
Yeah. Well, of course, we have to, I mean, siguro parang we're like a broken record, no? We have to have strong political parties. There are a lot of proposals in both houses of Congress seeking to strengthen political parties. and that should be prioritized. No, political reform is necessary without changing the constitution, because as we all agree, we're not yet. This is not the right time, and also, well, I mean, in case there's a good time to change the constitution, the way the senators are voted should also be rethought. No?
Instead of national, regional?
Yes, yes. Because, of course, there will be unintended consequences. It might also sort of make political dynasties more powerful. We don't know. But right now, it's untenable, and also it no longer, it's not, the 24 senators, I mean, if you think about it, we have, more than 100 million population at this point,
110.
because the 24 senators was designed in the 1930s, 40s, and at the time, what was the population of the Philippines? Because the idea was to have a group of people who will be occupying the upper chamber, but they still have to represent the country. So at that time, I guess there were 12 regions probably. So the idea was to have parang 2 representatives per region, but they were going to be elected nationwide. But there was also a time na elected siya region-wide.
Yes, that's right. I think the first version,
Yeah.
Senate 1.0, that's why we had more Muslim senators, for instance.
Yeah.
Because we made sure of the, and I think you had some, intellectuals like Claro M. Recto becoming senators because of the smaller.
Right now, kasi it has become really a popularity contest.
One other possibility that I can see, one other possible source that will impact on the Senate is public opinion. Pero, Inday, did Duterte break the public opinion mold? And does public opinion really have an impact on Senate conduct?
It depends on how strong public opinion is.
Yeah.
It depends on how strong the groups that frame that behind the coalition that forms a wave of public opinions. Unfortunately, that would mean, of course, basically, if you're confronted by government policies that you don't want, you have a strong opposition. We don't have nothing. We have nothing there, John, unfortunately. So that's also the question of how do we have an independent Senate? We have an independent citizenry, independent political parties from the ground, not just from the top up. But it's all dominated by dynasties that even those who may start off independent eventually fall into the trap of being with this side or that. Until we see again a vibrant opposition, there'll be nothing to counteract whatever supermajorities do in the Senate.
Thank you. I have so many more questions, but we're running long. So let me ask one last final question. Back to reality. Given the Senate that we have now under new leadership, what is the 1 or 2 things we should look out for in the next several months that will tell us, okay, this is the character of the Senate. This is actually how the Escudero Senate will move or decide. Maybe Inday was suggesting maybe January would be the time when the true colors would come out. The true colors would come out, but what are we looking at? Maybe 1 or 2. So maybe Jean first, and then Inday.
Well, right now I would presume that Escudero is already calling, the Senate Secretariat and asking for bills that can be expedited if there's no controversy. That's one. Because of course, yung magpapakitang gilas, so to speak, no. Secondly, well, I mean, you want me to assess whether they're going to be independent or they're going to toe the line of Malacanang?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, if what would be the telltale sign of either?
I think the amendments to the rice tarification law is already moving in the House, so that's probably also one thing to watch out for. What else? The budget, of course, no? So let's see how it will go.
And Inday?
The mentioning budgets, I'm not going to go there. I'm going to mention what feminist groups are saying.
Okay.
They're very glad. I know Francis Tolentino has low ratings, but they're glad that he's there, they said.
Divorce.
Because taken away Joel Villanueva and given a chance for the bills, for the legislature that women's groups have been wanting to do. And maybe, I think Escudero is more liberal in that sense, so maybe we'll see something there.
Yeah.
I think the occupant of Malacanang is also is more liberal also in that sense there. So they're saying that they're actually happy on this score. They were actually very happy, surprisingly.
That's right. Yeah, I did hear that also.
Yeah.
People are breathing a sigh of relief because Joel Villanueva is no longer there.
Yeah. For example,
so the divorce bill.
Yeah, for example, the divorce bill has already been approved, I think, and they're really worried that it might not pass under a Zubiri Senate presidency, and also the anti-sexual orientation, gender identity and expression bill. So I hope it moves now that Escudero is the Senate president and Villanueva is no longer the majority leader.
Yes, so maybe the best thing to do is to monitor what the Rules Committee is doing, because that's how the Senate works. Thank you very much, Professor Jean Encinas Franco of the University of the Philippines, and our indispensable journalist, Inday Espina Verona. This was an instructive and even thought-provoking discussion. Again, many thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Inday. Thank you,
Thank you, Kat.
John.
And that's it for us tonight. The next step for engaged citizens, as always, is to take a more active part in rebuilding our democracy. See you in the public square. This is John Nery. Thank you and good night.